Um, President White, will you provide us the report of the CSSA?
Thank you, Chair Eisen. Yesterday, President Sakaki spoke beautifully about the feelings of loss and love that our Sonoma State community is experiencing as they recover from the horrific wildfires that claimed many lives and homes and left no one in the community unscathed. I want to echo her thanks to the first responders and those regular, everyday people who stepped up for both neighbors and strangers in such a desperate time of need. As our country is repeatedly shaken by tragedy, in Northern California and Puerto Rico and Las Vegas, New York City, and most recently Texas, it can be so hard to see any good. But I'm reminded of that old Mr. Rogers quote that always seems to circulate after a tragedy. Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. In a political climate as divisive as the one we exist in today, it's easy to become increasingly polarized. It's easy to see those who disagree with us as other, to hate, to yell, to name call, to cling to the familiar. Sometimes looking for the helpers is the only thing that keeps me sane and engaged, as I experience day after day bad news fatigue. So I'd like to take a moment now to talk about the helpers here in the CSU. I want to thank Trustee George Reyes-Salinas and others who championed the resolution that will be discussed later this morning, protections for undocumented students, alumni, and employees. We cannot be distracted from the fact that there's not yet a legislative solution through Congress to protect the dreamers who are essential and valued members of our community. We are laser focused on supporting our undocumented peers, and we will not stop talking about this until protections are in place and they can go on to live their daily lives here without fear. Whether they are neighbors or strangers to us, we must stand up for them. I want to thank those who work in all different capacities to support CSU students inside and outside of the classroom, through food pantries, mental health services, through research opportunities and other fantastic high-impact practices. Thankfully, there are so many helpers in the CSU that I can't possibly name them all. But it's amazing how one CSU employee taking one extra moment can make a world of difference for a student. We look up to our faculty, advisors, department staff members. You are the success stories that we aspire to replicate. I vividly remember the required advising appointment that I had 2 years ago in the fall of my senior year of undergrad at Stan State. For a variety of reasons, sabbatical and retirement of different faculty members in my department, I'd been shuffled between advisors for the past few semesters. I'll never forget sitting across from Dr. Tumalo for the first time when he turned to me at the end of the appointment and asked, "Have you thought about grad school?" I hadn't. No one had ever asked me, "Have you thought about grad school?" If Dr. Tumalo hadn't taken an extra moment to see me and to push me, it likely would have never occurred to me as an option. I wonder if he knows what a helper he was to me that day. I wonder how many students have had their entire life path changed for the better because one CSU employee took one extra moment to know them. I also want to thank the people who asked tough questions to help create a better system to serve California. Here at the Board of Trustees, on the campuses, and in the classrooms, we must keep asking the tough questions, saying what needs to be said, upholding the mission of affordability, accessibility, high quality, and completion. And I would offer that all of those things don't mean much if equity isn't also in the equation. As the board begins to deliberate on this year's funding request, and as the numbers become more clear, one thing remains obvious. We're going to need more funding to do the important work that needs to be done. And based on last year's final budget, we know the governor will propose to give the CSU less than it needs. This puts the board in a position where hard choices will almost definitely have to be made. I know that students are ready to join all of you, as well as all system stakeholders, in working to receive this full request. You have our commitment that we will continue to advocate for a budget request that reinforces the values of students, the CSU system, and the state, that all Californians deserve access to an affordable, quality higher education. I know that while we do this work, plans will have to be made for how to pay for just the minimal obligations of this budget, the system's mandatory costs, and agreed upon compensation increases. Yesterday, we heard that a tuition increase is on the table as a possible option for addressing the structural budget deficit. A year after receiving the first tuition increase in 6 years, it will be hard for students and families to hear that they may need to pay more yet again. Students are committed to preserving the affordability of the CSU. As we begin these conversations, I want to make the case for blunt, honest dialogue amongst all stakeholders. It's unfortunate that in today's world, that type of conversation is becoming more and more elusive. Disagreements on strategy can grow easily into distrust of values and personalities. It almost seems as if we're looking for ways to see each other as an enemy, even when we agree on much more than we don't. And unfortunately, we here in the CSU are not immune. But I know that we're capable of seeing the best in one another, recognizing, as a representative from CFA said earlier this morning, our unified commitment to providing a high-quality, financially accessible education. We are capable of seeing the best in one another, even if we may sometimes disagree on the best way to get to our location. This honest conversation must start with equitable compensation. Students truly believe that our faculty, our staff members, and our administrators need to be able to earn a wage that enables them to live a decent life in this state. That is something we all value. The CSA isn't the 23 campuses, the land, the buildings. It's the people and the interactions between these people that truly define the CSU. And it is a moral imperative that the individuals who make up the CSU are able to thrive as they work in all ways to educate and support us. As the Board of Trustees addresses this inherent structural deficit in the budget request, and as you consider tuition and cuts to deal with it, we need to be able to look at one another as people and discuss how all of these things relate to one another. Paying our faculty and staff more costs more money. And if the state is unwilling to pay for these things, the conversation needs to be had about what is fair for students to have to pay for. As you, the individuals entrusted to lead our institution, deliberate on this issue, we want to see you have these real conversations. This is the responsibility of the board to make these hard choices. Should students be required to pay more for their education so that our staff can be compensated a decent and fair wage? Must we have this conversation each and every year? Or is there a plan to pull us away from this diametric system that pits students' financial interests against the interests of our employees? It's not sustainable to talk about tuition increases and campus cuts year after year. It's exhausting for everyone involved. And quite frankly, it distracts from what we should be talking about every day. How can we do better for those we serve? I don't envy the responsibility that you all carry to make these choices. CSSA stands ready as a resource in advocacy and in deliberation. Looking around this chamber, I know that we have the intelligence, the morality, and the courage to move forward together, to stand up, to ask the hard questions, to go above and beyond. I hope that we can all be helpers as we craft solutions that fit our mission of student success. Thank you, Chair Eisen.
Thank you, Maggie. Fantastic as usual.